In the late 1930s, tensions were rising, and not just in the USSR. In an episode of another series, I already talked about how even the most innocuous of the Soviet films from the 1930s had a military theme or a patriotic message. Well, the cartoon industry wasn't much different. As you recall from the previous episode, the old man Ivan had a lengthy section devoted to the superiority of the indestructible Soviet tanks, planes, and submarines. References to historical events were also common, like the Russian Civil War seen in the War Chronicles. This cartoon recalls how several foreign nations tried to interfere with the young Soviet Union without success. It's not always clear which nations the film is making fun of, but there appears to be a cowardly Brit hanging onto his battleship. And, of course, there are the Japanese, depicted in the same way everyone did it back then. Famous folk heroes are always in need in times of trouble. And so are the random made-up heroes like Fyodor the Hunter here. Fyodor's two brothers leave him alone to guard home with his dog, but wouldn't you know it, those pesky Japanese try to cross the Russian border, just like in real life. Good thing the amazing Soviet army arrives in time to fend them off. Ivas, a Belarusian man, has a different problem. The lazy Polish generals force him to fight for their cause. Ivas performs his task with excellence, and once again, the Soviet army shows up to conquer Poland, to liberate the Polish people from their oppressors. Finally, there's Vasya Turkin, who takes out 3 sneaky Germans with some help from his dog. A few months into the war, it became clear that Moscow was no longer safe. Many of the animators joined the fight, and many did not return. In October of 1941, SMF evacuated to Samarkand, an ancient city in Uzbekistan. The studio was given a temporary home in 2 vacant places of worship, the Armenian Church of the Holy Mother and the Catholic Church of St. John the Baptist, about a block away. While working and living in Spartan conditions, the animators concentrated on the so-called cine posters, very short films with a clear propaganda message. I learned a great deal about the German army from watching these documentary films. For example, did you know that their leader was a very small, fat man who ran around throwing bombs? Apparently, he could increase his size by inflating himself, but that was a dangerous trick. He could also shapeshift into a hyena and even a boar, which makes sense since he was a direct descendant of the 13th century Teutonic Knights, who were also boars. In his free time, the mustached man worked as a clown in a circus and trained strange-looking dogs. He was friends with Napoleon. They even slept together in the same coffin. The German army was also very interesting. Did you know that their planes were actually mechanical birds? The submarines were likewise modeled after sharks and other sea creatures. How do you identify a German secret agent, you ask? Well, that's easy. They have certain symbols carved into their foreheads. Plus, they have fangs. The short films tell the story of the leader's demise. First, he got beat up in the dark by disembodied hands. Then, a giant Soviet mechanical soldier shook hands with his English colleague and accidentally squished the mustache man in the middle. Finally, the glorious Soviet army arrived to clean up the place, the footage of which definitely wasn't copied from some other film. As the tide of the war turned, patriotic folk heroes were once again in fashion, like Chapaev here. In real life, Vasily Chapaev was an uneducated yet charismatic commander in the Russian Civil War. But thanks to Soviet propaganda, Chapaev became a godlike hero, capable of inspiring entire armies. Meanwhile, the wartime civilians learned the importance of electricity. Meet Maria Ivanovna from One of Many. She may be completely brain dead, but even she knows that electricity is produced by a man inside of a generator, and another tiny man keeps track of it inside the counter. And if you use too much energy, then your lamp will turn into a boy, and the boy will make a poster come alive, and the poster will turn your power off. In the wartime United States, it was common for animators to make military instructional films for soldiers, pilots, and the like. As I couldn't find any information on a similar practice in the USSR, I reached out to Georgy Borodin, a historian of Soviet animation. And according to him, yes, there was a similar custom, except that the studio responsible wasn't SMF, but Voyen Tech Film. Here are the names of some of the films made at that studio, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to locate any footage. They're probably hiding in an archive somewhere. Meanwhile, even cartoons not related to the war, such as fairy tales and fables, often had themes of banding together against an aggressor, like the belligerent beavers. How awesome is that title, by the way? A beaver family builds a settlement, but a creature attacks them. I don't know, like a lynx or something. The beavers fight back, build an automatic ballista, and soon enjoy their new lynx rug. In the New Year's tree, a pack of mean wolves prevent Grandpa Frost from delivering his presents. The animals of the forest join together, Grandpa Frost is rescued, everyone celebrates, and then the moon comes alive and gives me nightmares. Moska and the Elephant is an adaptation of a famous fable by Ivan Krylov. A tiny dog yaps at an elephant, but the elephant ignores the mutt, and the other dogs make fun of Moska. In another Krylov fable, the tit, yeah, I know, it's a bird, the tit declares to the animal kingdom that he, or she, will burn the sea. The animals don't question how that would work, but do gather to watch and prepare for a seafood meal. But the bird fails completely. And if the parallels weren't obvious, remember that Krylov wrote the original fable in the early 19th century to ridicule Napoleon. By 1943, Moscow was safe enough for SMF to return. The war continued, but the animators were once again making cartoons for children. And, as before, the inspiration came from Kornei Tchaikovsky, the culprit behind Aibolit, Moy Dadur, and Mucha Tsokotucha. In The Stolen Sun, another product of his sick imagination, a crocodile eats the sun, plunging the world into darkness. For a children's story, this is downright apocalyptic, with all these animals lost and scared. Fortunately, a bear takes on the crocodile, Mortal Kombat style. The telephone makes even less sense. Different animals call the author of the poem complaining about non-existent issues, as if he was an IT support line. The best part by far is the author himself appearing in live action and reacting to the wacky poem he wrote. The Brumberg sisters, pioneers of Soviet animation, made yet another important contribution with The Tale of Tsar Sultan. The plot is convoluted, but just like any other tale by the literary genius Alexander Pushkin, most people in Russia know it by heart. Let me just say that it begins with a young princess and her newborn child being thrown in the ocean, so you know it's gonna be good. There are giant soldiers who live in the sea, a shape-shifting sorceress, a creepy squirrel that produces gems somehow. The tale does not disappoint. Not only the Brombergs made a 35-minute cartoon during the wartime, they made the entire thing in color. I know the color version exists, it's just not available anywhere. The cartoon was voiced by famous movie stars, and even has some rotoscoping, which is a neat technique of animating live-action footage for extra realism. Stylistically, the film was a great follow-up to The Tale of Priest and Balda by Panteleimon Sazonov, which is particularly confusing since Brombergs made their very next film, Sinbad the Sailor, in a completely different and Western-influenced style. Not to say that the film is bad, it's a fun action and adventure story. The end title proclaimed that it was the end of the first adventure, but they never made any sequels. As the world celebrated the end of the war, the Soviet film industry had a small victory of its own. Large stocks of high-quality Agfacolor film were appropriated from Germany, replacing the less convenient Soviet 3-strip color process. The animators immediately put it to work with Teram Mo, another adaptation of a folk tale about different animals coexisting in one house. Clearly, the war had an influence on the story, as the characters defend their home from rampaging forest dwellers. Bravely, the animals fight off the invaders, the mouse with a broom, the rooster with water, and the hedgehog has a freaking machine gun. Meanwhile, the animation was a notch above the previous Soviet cartoons and signaled the beginning of a new nature-themed era. But that is a story for another time. If you would like to get an idea of what Soviet wartime propaganda animation looked like, then check out these two cartoons, or any other ones I mentioned. For non-war related cartoons from this period, I recommend The Tale of Tsar Sultan and Teram Mo. In the next episode, we'll discuss post-war Soviet animation, the shift to realism and nature, and some exceedingly depressing children's cartoons.